say shotgun 650 or 650 shotgun?
Shotgun 650 twin.
Shotgun 650 twin.
Say that 2 times fast.
Shotgun 650 twin. This is the Royal Enfield Shotgun 650 Twin that was customized for the Netflix movie The Kitchen, and we're going to find out all about it. So, Adrian, thank you for coming down. Geiker, thank you for coming down, mate. So, Adrian, head of customer motorsport at Royal Enfield, Geiker, multi-disciplinary artist.
Indeed.
And you guys collaborated to create this machine.
That we did.
How did this project come to life?
That's a very good question. I think you met a man in a restaurant or a bar, and then suddenly we had a movie bike.
Yeah, it's a long story, but my brother was the director of The Kitchen, right. And it's something that I've been working on with him for a long time. And like many years ago, as part of the kind of world building research, I wrote an essay and I did a lot of image research as part of that world building. Mm-hmm. And the film was on ice at that time. Fast forward a few years, and I just happened to be just out with my friend Shay in Lisbon, and we walked past a Himalayan that was parked on the side of the street, and I knew there was one about to come out, and I did mention to him that I wanted to get into motorcycling again because I hadn't been on a bike for a long time, and you know what, I wanted the Himalayan because I said, you know what, I want to get out of the city and I want to go on a mission. I had this whole kind of exploration fantasy in my head. And he said, oh, I'm friends with somebody at Royal Enfield. You should hit them up because they're always interested in doing interesting stuff. And you do interesting stuff. And so he put me in touch with Tom Perkins and he came to my studio. And in the kind of period between that initial conversation happening and him coming to my studio, the kitchen, which is a whole other story, actually got green lit.
Right.
And the conversation initially we were having was about, me and Tom was meant to be about something to do with the Himalayan, perhaps some kind of collaboration or whatever. But I realized that the kitchen, they hadn't actually given any thought to Izzy's motorcycle.
Right. And it's such a sort of key part of the movie, isn't it? The bike and the sort of the story that it opens up. 100%.
And my brother is someone who spent a lot of time trekking around India on Royal Enfields. So it seemed pretty clear that what we needed to do at that moment was to collaborate in the kitchen. And Tom said to me, oh, you know, because I was telling him about this film because it was, you know, present that we'd got a green light. And he said, if you need any bikes for, you know, in the background or anything, then, you know, let me know. We'd be up for helping out. And I just said, actually, Izzy's bike, if it's going to be true to the, you know, what's behind the film, certainly as far as I'm concerned or my brother's concerned, it makes sense for it to be a Royal Enfield.
Yeah. And how far into the future is the film set? I know it's not kind of tight.
It's like 2040 something.
2040. Yeah. So I really like the way in the film there's kind of bikes from the present day alongside vehicles that you've never seen before and some things that you recognize a bit. And then this bike kind of fits in the middle of both. I mean...
No, that's just real life, isn't it? You're out on the street today and you see things from 20, 30 years ago, just as likely as you're going to see something from today.
Yeah.
So you just fast forward that.
And then that's where you end up.
Yeah.
And do you see, before we talk about the design of this, do you see this as a production machine as it would have left the factory in 20 years, or is this a modified bike by Izzy?
This is a modified bike in the same way that, you know, a lot of those cars and bikes that are out there on the street today, many of them have gotten to this point, have been modified in some way or another, particularly a daily commuter. And this is Izzy's daily commuter.
Yeah.
have been modified. And so, I mean, that was part of the excitement in coming to the project for us was that world that you and your brother and the team had built, making something for a different world, projecting into the future, then sort of rewinding, and then, you know, sort of creating a bike for the future that was from the past, but not this past, was still in the future. You know, to wrap your head around that. But it was a really neat conceptual, you know, mind twister to dig into, and very, very different. Even if we followed the same processes we'd usually follow for bike design, the whole conceptualizing of it with Geica and with the team was an entirely different thing for us, and it was really a lot of fun for our team.
Yeah, we had this idea of it being a kind of a future classic. But I always thought about where I grew up, and you'd see people sort of, they had got, you know, a kind of Japanese bike from the 80s, but it was now the 90s, but then they kind of changed it up, and that was what we wanted because it seemed real. Right, like it seemed attainable, it seemed achievable, and you could also put your stamp on it, as opposed to looking at things that are just way out of our price range, and also didn't seem to relate to our world. And so, like, realism was like in all of the world building, and particularly in this, was the key thing. You know, for me, I argued strongly and won that argument that the bike, we need to make a bike. We're not going to do this in post. We're not going to do some kind of space age, you know, thing that it just doesn't make any sense. Why don't we actually go to a real builder, build a real custom that actually runs and is actually desirable and will pass on the street, you know?
How many did you end up building? Was this bike used in the film, this actual one?
This actual one was used in the film. We ended up building 3 for the film, some which were sort of riders, others which were for posing and so on. So each one has a different use, and you always have to have a couple of these things when you're filming in case one fails or something like that. You do not want to be the guy who was responsible for delaying an entire day of shooting or something like that. You do not want to be that person. So we were very keen to pad it a little bit, but all of them ended up getting used in the end, and again, that was another unique part for us. Usually you build one custom. Its whole point is one off and everything. To sort of do the same thing a couple of times was a kind of a cool thing as well.
And so once you had the sort of the concept and the shape, I know you said it's your normal process, so were you kind of making out of clay and getting those shapes right?
Well, I think that's where the fun part with Geica came in, was in the process leading up to that. So, we kicked the design out to our entire studio. Once we got in the brief and sort of inspiration images and everything from Geica and the team, it was a matter of sort of opening it up to everybody. And we have studios in India and in the UK. So we threw it out there and said, guys, you know, make some ideas. And then we reviewed them together and sort of narrowed things down and kicked it back out again with the feedback, narrowed it down again until we came up with, I think this is a composite of 3 designer sketches. Each one had one element that worked really well, and just sort of put them together, and there you go in the end. And then, yes, it was a 3D process. We went into data, all 3D. And the cool thing about this is we didn't want to, again, see that previous fear about not endangering a shoot day. So we wanted to minimize the amount of actual working stuff that we changed. Because the second you change something like that, you add risk, right? You know, we test our bikes for tens of thousands of miles. So you know, the second you change something away from that, you're entering unknown territory, right? So we wanted to keep as much standard. So actually, this is a stock shotgun for the most part underneath. Rapid prototype covers on it. So the stock tank is underneath there. All stock, and we bolted on
all the covers.
So that we would minimize our risk going into the shoot.
What year? Because obviously we're all here today for the Shotgun 650 UK launch. So what year was it that you were kind of pulling all this together?
About 2 years ago, I guess. About 2 years, sound about right?
So in the Shotgun's sort of process of
pre-production bike. So, you know, we create a number of different builds as we go into production, testing out things steadily. And so we pulled a couple of pre-productions and did it. But part of the reason for using the Shotgun was it's a different bike for us conceptually. The stock bike is different for us conceptually. And it wasn't out yet. So even if the movie came out before we produced the bike, It would have a recognizably Royal Enfield look because we've included like the frame loop for the rear shocks and everything. So there'd be Royal Enfield elements in there, but it would be something unfamiliar to people. And that was kind of an attractive thing along with the concept for the movie.
I think it was amazing to be able to work on a base that just wasn't out. So you never get to do that, right? And
peek behind the curtain.
Yeah, peek behind the curtain. Remember Kano himself had to write this, so he had to learn how to ride and then ride this bike. So, as he was saying, there's only so much things that we can do.
Yeah.
It's
got to be.
You don't want to drop the bike. Right? Yeah. But at the same time, it was a new bike.
Yeah.
And for me, that was where a huge amount of the excitement came from sending like initial sketches and images and things like that. And then seeing how the team came together and it was just like a one moving unit to get, okay, how are we going to do this? How are we going to get to this vision? Which I think is, I think sometimes design can be, for me anyway, or in my practice can be quite, it's like nobody gets it till the end, or I make big, room size installations and then I've got to explain what it is. And this was a chance to say, look, this is what we're trying to do. How do we optimize it and make it real and make it, the best it can be? And actually, I think the most fun part for me was, as a film lover, or as a writer, as an artist, how do you get inside the mind of a character and express that? We had lots of more conversations about that than we did about, okay, this is where the exhaust needs to go. This is where
because if you get that right, everything else falls into place.
Exactly.
You understand the core of it.
And then it was funny, like on the day of the shoot, it's like I designed some stickers to put on the bike, right? And
these ones here.
Yeah. And Kano he was really particular. Like he had to, that had to pass. He had to choose where they went and which ones they were.
You can improve anything with good sticker placement. So
he was getting into character. It's his bike after all. So.
And so that was so like, it felt really good. On the day, I got to the set, you could see, okay, the character, he's a really incredible kind of method actor, believes this is believable.
Yeah.
And, I think in any kind of speculative thing, that's for me, always the aim is like, how do you make it believable? I think, later on, when we were filming, the kind of the other piece was just the piece around this, and we ended up taking a bike down to Waterloo, and it was the middle of the night, and some young like street bike kids turned up, and it was all like holding on breath, like, what's they going to say?
Yeah.
And they looked at it, and they were like, "This is dope. What is this? This is Royal Enfield."
That's what you want.
Crazy.
That's the seal of approval there.
Okay. Like for me, that's where I come from. So it was like, this is going to work? You know what I mean? And it has.
All right, can we run through a few? I've got a couple of questions. So the big fork shrouds there, the standard forks.
Sure, the forks are underneath
under there. And were you kind of like, for you, is it fork shrouds or is it a sort of movie version of a girder front end or?
I don't know, what do you think it is? I mean,
one of those, man. It's movie magic.
It
sure is, man.
What the audience believes it is, right?
Yeah.
And so a lot of this is very, very up for anybody's interpretation to look at. We like the idea of having something a bit different on the front. So, yeah, it's very easily be a girder.
It's got such a striking face with it, hasn't it?
Well, we also wanted to carry through some elements from the stock shotgun, even though not out yet. And part of the shotgun is this sort of nacelle feature, this headlamp surround. And so we wanted to include that element in it, but obviously something a bit different. And so that's where you get a sort of covered approach to the front, is that thing that's part of our brand with our classic and so on, that's been evolved then for the shotgun and then evolved again for the bike. So we can see that continuity going in, because it's a bike from the future, past of the future. And so you still have those elements that are Royal Enfield, but sort of just tweaked a bit,
And I love the sort of monocoque bodywork, the one piece, and sort of how it gives you that huge height from the sort of the frame loop of the shotgun, but how that's been incorporated with the mudguard works really well.
Well, I mean, this is the beauty of the stock shotgun, at the risk of doing a plug for the shotgun. But by having a floating rider seat as stock, it allowed us to just take that off, make a new fabricated steel subframe for it, and put whatever we liked on, rather than having to chop and change and whatever else, which is you often have to do if you're going to change the rider seat. Changing your pillion seat's often a little bit easier. They're more bolt-on pillion subframes. But having that flexibility, just bolt on, and those using the same bolt holes that we would bolt the stock seat onto. It was super easy to change it up.
And is this a shroud over the swing arm?
That's a shroud over the swing arm as well. So it's a stock swing arm.
Yeah.
Rapid printed shroud around it. Again, we didn't want to compromise any of that functionality.
Yeah. Love these wheel covers. I like the shrouded shocks as well.
Yeah. That's funny because that's not a super new style.
Yeah, it's like old school. It's a little bit of a reference.
But by putting it in a different context, right, by blending it with all the bodywork, it suddenly feels very futuristic in the way like a spring, which is perhaps more modern, like an uncovered spring, more modern technology there, doesn't. So it's about like taking those elements that kind of fit together, and suddenly you've got a cohesive look to the bike.
Obviously, these aren't doing anything?
Those are not doing anything. That's all movie
magic.
stuff.
And do you see it as, is that like, are those wires reference to it being hybrid or petrol or?
In my head, it would be some kind of engine management system, AI engine management system. So, I feel like it would be a hybrid vehicle. In some regard, it might use some form of clean, like
something we haven't
come up with, and it's just has a kind of heavy duty management system. And therefore, we need wires, right?
Yeah,
therefore we need wires.
So another part, I love these covers. Yeah. I bet you're going to get people asking for them as an aftermarket part. They're great.
I think people are going to ask for
the wheel shrouds.
It's very much, a lot of people love those, and they always, whenever we put a wheel cover on something, we just did another collaboration last year where we put some wheel covers on it. Everybody loves them. It's a nightmare from a dynamics perspective and a liability perspective, but they do look amazing. So
this is it.
And this is what happens when you let designers off the chain. It's like when you have that sense of future, who knows what the technology is going to be, and maybe it becomes entirely easier and more practical to do that in the future. Casting technology or whatever evolves, and boom, there you can have them at very low cost or something. And that's the fun part with envisioning a future bike, is that you can do a lot more with a what if than designing a bike for today.
I think it's really interesting actually, working like that. It's something I'm going to definitely carry forward, because I think when you think about it, there were some designs that were just like almost like too cool. They just have to get made.
Yeah.
Right? I remember the conversation with my brother being like, okay, this is what we want, but this is not what Izzy could write. Right. And it's because you're rarely asking somebody to imagine something realistic in the future, but there's no limit to what it can be.
So you're thinking design it first and then force the engineers to catch up?
But design from a position of research, like historical research that's broad and isn't just about the technology, but it's also about the context and
it's about the believability, right? Yeah. And if it's complete BS, then people won't buy it. They'll say, "Oh, that's cool," but it won't fit in the movie. And one of the great things about The Kitchen as a movie is the world is very lived in. It's not some crazy thing. It's elements of today blended with elements of tomorrow, and the people don't change so much. It's having those people in that context that makes the movie amazing. So if the bike were just this, as you say, some hover something or another, you've just severed that reality right there, and it makes it harder to believe in the movie.
We really tried to think about, geopolitical things. We ended up, writing a history of the world starting from now till the end of the century, right? And that became the world of The Kitchen. So every decision refers back to that.
Because the world is, I'm sure because of that, the world feels so believable. And I think when I first saw it, I was like, oh, it's going to be an action movie. And then I started watching it and I was like, oh, this is like an emotional father-son story and a commentary on society and housing and all those things. And it was like, oh, geez, this is real, even though it's not real. And that combo is awesome. Gents, listen, we've had a great chat about this bike. Thanks so much for coming in, man. And
thank you for having us.
Keep hold of it here for a little while and people can come check it out.
Please do.
Great. Thanks.
And off to a good start. You're supposed to be setting a good example for us.
Yeah.
Solid start on the bloopers, though, so there's a win.